We begin this hour with these proclamations from President Trump during his inaugural address last year.
Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. And under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America.
But in the years since, we've seen the opposite from Trump, with a slide more towards autocracy than democracy. Just look at what we've seen this past week alone. There's been numerous Democrats in Congress who revealed that they're under investigation by Trump's Justice Department over protected speech in telling military members that they can refuse illegal orders. The same DOJ has launched criminal investigations into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, both Democrats, for speaking out against the ongoing immigration crackdown in their state. And at the same time, the president continues to threaten the use of the Insurrection Act to be able to deploy the military in Minnesota against the wishes of the state's leaders. To top it all off, Trump even floated the idea of canceling the midterm elections, given that his party's chances of holding the House do not look good. The White House claims he was simply being facetious. Joining us now is Liz Oyer, former DOJ pardon and federal public defender, and Ty Cobb, who served as the White House attorney in the first Trump administration. Thank you to you both for joining us. Liz, we're going to get to you, but Ty, I want to start with you first. Do you feel like this week has been a turning point in the administration when you look at the way Trump has wielded his maximalist power and threatened the independence of all of the different agencies he works with?
Yes, although, we've been turning almost every day since, January 20th when he was sworn in. I mean, we're so far removed from the America that we once were in terms of, fighting for freedom and democracy around the world and inclusiveness and peace and law and order in the United States. The rule of law has crumbled, and he's been assaulting that ever since he got in. But certainly, yes, he's ramped it up. He becomes bolder and bolder. And his enablers, seem to tolerate more and more in terms of, what they're willing to be remembered in history for. They clearly are like the Nazi enablers at this stage of the game. Given what's going on in Greenland, around the world, and in Minneapolis and soon elsewhere.
Liz, we're going to get to some pardons that happened because I know Jackie wants to ask about that. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting, concerning, depressing, was Trump kind of making that joke, or according to the White House, a joke about the midterm elections. Let's play what Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said about that.
The president was simply joking. He was saying, we're doing such a great job. We're doing everything the American people thought. Maybe we should just keep rolling. But he was speaking facetiously.
What is funny about maybe canceling elections in a country that began because a king was making decisions for people without any kind of their say? So I don't think it's funny. I think other people don't think it's funny. That's not how this country is supposed to operate. And also, Donald Trump's jokes often become our reality.
I think also, on the merits, it's not that funny.
Right, correct. It's like, if it's going to be funny, be funny.
It's not funny. So what's happening here is they say something, he says something, they see how it lands, and if it doesn't land well, they say, oh, it was a joke. And we're seeing so many outrageous, unbelievable things being said by Trump and the people around him that we should be able to take seriously what they say, and we shouldn't have to guess, are they going to say later it was a joke? One of the things that was said this week that I thought was just absolutely chilling, shook me to my core, was to see Todd Blanche tweet that he believes the governor and the mayor of Minneapolis are engaged in terrorism. And it's just another example of these extreme statements. I mean, terrorism, because they're speaking up against overreach by ICE, and Blanche has now said that they are the targets of an investigation by the Justice Department rather than the person who killed this woman, Renee Good. The things that are being said by our leaders, they're just extreme and outrageous. And if we don't know whether we can take them seriously, that is really just an upsetting place to be.
I choose to always take them seriously.
The other thing about going after the governor and the mayor is that in addition to pushing back against the administration, they also said in the same breath to the people of Minnesota and Minneapolis, please be peaceful.
Right.
Like every third sentence, it was please be peaceful, which makes this challenge to them even more outrageous. Ty, you were there in the first Trump administration, and in that time, Time Magazine, is it Time Magazine? No, New York Times, I'm sorry. In 2021, there was a headline, Trump aides prepared Insurrection Act order during debate over protests. These were the protests that erupted around the country, and particularly here in Washington over the murder of George Floyd. And now here we are with the Washington Post reporting today, Pentagon readies 1,500 soldiers to possibly deploy to Minnesota. Again, since you were there in the first administration, please, the president's been itching to invoke this Insurrection Act since the first term. How likely is it, maybe even this week, that he will invoke it because of what's happening in Minneapolis at his instigation?
So, I wasn't there when in 2020 when that was done. I don't have any recollection of any discussion of the Insurrection Act in my time, but there were guardrails back then. There were people who could say no to the president. And now he's surrounded by, sycophants and enablers and, people who don't say no. In fact, it's just stunning the number of people that have signed on for, what's going on in Minnesota and what's going on in Greenland. Things that would have never been tolerated in the first 250 years of our democracy. But I do think he desperately wants to invoke the Insurrection Act. I think it's come upon him a little sooner than he and Stephen Miller and others had planned. But I think martial law is definitely in the cards, and it's a way that he'll be able to control the elections. I will say that Governor Walz, in terms of activating the National Guard and having them stage and assemble, I'm fine with that. But deploying them actually to the streets is playing into Trump's game. Deploying him into the streets invites the confrontation that, frankly, legally they need in order to lawfully invoke the Insurrection Act, and they don't have it right now.
I do really want to get to the slew of new pardons and commutations that we've seen this week, which are pretty eyebrow-raising. But, Ty, you just reminded me that I do feel like we saw headline after headline during the first administration about the White House counsel's office weighing in, blocking something, deliberating, being a part of the conversations. Where are they?
So my recollection is, they were there somewhat, although it was really more, Sessions and Barr who would say no and throw cold water on Trump's ideas. I don't know where the White House counsel's office is, other than helping him write executive orders that are clearly absurd and unlawful. I mean, he's pardoning people for state crimes. That has no force and effect, as Liz can explain. There just is nobody there to say no. There's nobody there who says anything other than how quickly can we do this, and that's particularly concerning. That would be concerning in any administration, but it's particularly concerning when your leader, his most demented, narcissistic, vengeful whims, like the prosecutions of enemies. This alleged, investigation of Walz and Fry for merely, complaining and begging for restraint, from an agency that's killing people. That is otherworldly. That is definitely authoritarianism, and we're under their control at this stage of the game.
I yield to Jackie, because Jackie's like this pardons question is hers.
Well, I just feel like, Liz, we've talked about this before. There appears to be two-track dialogue about who can and who should be able to cut the line when it comes to pardon and commutations. And the ones that were issued this week, if we can pull up the headlines for them quickly. Puerto Rico's former governor, Wanda Vasquez Garced. She faced campaign bribery charges. An environmental services owner who dumped raw sewage into municipal sewer systems. James Philip Womack, the son of Steve Womack, who was sentenced to 8 years for distributing meth. And Adriana Camberos, Trump had pardoned her for her involvement in a fraud scheme related to the resale of wholesale groceries. Yeah. What stands out to you
and
about
that's her second pardon.
I was going to say, there's someone there who's...
This girl has two pardons, two-time recipient of pardons.
Yeah, there are so many problematic pardons that have been granted, but I want to focus on two of the ones you mentioned. Adriana Camberos received her second clemency from Donald Trump in about 5 years total. She committed a fraud. She went to prison. She got released early because of Trump during his first presidency. She went back to prison very shortly thereafter for a new fraud, and now she's got a second pardon. So that really just sends the message that if you support Donald Trump, you can do whatever you want. The laws don't apply to you. He'll continue to pardon you if you commit crimes. That sends absolutely the wrong message to these people who are out there relying on that. But second, the governor of Puerto Rico, that was a major fraud investigation within the Justice Department, a very serious fraud. She got a very favorable plea deal under the early months of the Trump administration already in June of 2025 when the administration tried to start laying the narrative that that was a Biden weaponization prosecution, which is just absolutely false. And then she got this full pardon on the heels of it, and we learned that her co-defendant, who was also pardoned, contributed a total of $3.5 million to MAGA Inc., Trump's super PAC. So this is all completely corrupt. It's not about the Biden administration.
Stay at the top of the list?